Well, Dr. Ron Welch is back with us here for a second discussion. Thanks so much for taking this time to be with the Timberline community, Dr. Welch.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. For those, hopefully you listened to the first conversation we had. If not, I would encourage you to go back and listen to it. But Dr. Welch is a clinical psychologist. You've been practicing for 25, 26 years. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, just for a little bit of time. Yep.
Okay. And you've been on, how long have you been on staff at Denver Seminary?
I think this is year 13 now.
Wow. And what sort of classes are you teaching down at Denver Seminary?
I do a lot of administration too. I'm the administrative chair of the division, so I do a lot of work in administration, but I teach psychopathology. I teach, surprise, surprise, marriage and family. And then I teach ethics courses, professional orientation, and I also teach some classes on addictions too.
Wonderful. And then your most recent book is 10 Choices That Successful Couples Make. It's a fabulous book. I would really encourage people uh, in this time, buy it on Amazon, is there a digital copy of it as well? I have the hard
Yep. Anywhere
book.
you can find books, you can find a copy.
Okay. And it's just very practical. As we mentioned last time, every single chapter you start with this language of I choose to. And I like that emphasis, Dr. Welch, that you make on a successful marriage that really does last for a lifetime. It is a matter of choice. It's two people, but there are thousands of little choices, aren't there, involved in a marriage being successful or healthy, enjoyable.
hmm That also prevents people from feeling like, hey, we're kind of locked into who we are. This is just the way we are. I know my spouse. I've known him for 15, 20, 25 years. That's just who he is. This approach allows you to say, well, maybe that's who we were. It doesn't mean that's who we have to be in the future.
And you talk a lot in the book about conflict being a good thing. We talked a little bit about that in our last discussion, that conflict is different than fighting.
hmm
And that conflict is even, would you say, necessary, essential, good? Is that too far?
No, I don't think that's too far at all. I mean, how many couples do you know who never have any disagreement that you would say are in a healthy marriage? I mean, not everybody's going to think the same things. So you have to be able to honestly state your opinions and share differences and brainstorm ideas for the future, and that's going to involve talking about things that you feel differently about at times. So I would say, yeah, I mean, arguing and fighting isn't very often a necessary fun thing, but conflict, disagreement, differences of opinions, absolutely. I think that's a sign of a healthy marriage.
One of the things that you talk about in your book, you use an analogy, which I thought was brilliant. It was beautiful. The Niagara Falls analogy. And you said if you understand how this works, you can equip yourself so that you don't get so far down the road, or whatever the analogy might be, that you almost lose the ability to choose. Is that correct? Can you kind of unpack that?
Yeah, I started thinking down these lines when I read some work by a guy named Bill Fleeman many years ago in the prison system. I spent a lot of years in the prison system. I guess I should mention I was in the prison system as a psychologist, not incarcerated. I don't know if that matters to your community or not, but in general, I was looking at his work and thinking about the inmates I was working with, and he talked about how inmates and people in crisis often react at the edge of Niagara Falls. It's almost as if they're out of control. They can't stop from going over the falls. And inmates have these kind of problems. They would end up pulling out a shank and hurting somebody or beating somebody up at the moment that they were out of control of their anger. So I contacted their organization. I said, I really feel like this is what it's like for married couples, that they need to intervene earlier. They can't just live at the falls. So they gave me permission to use the metaphor, to start thinking through it and looking at it for relationships. And sure enough, I started realizing that if you ever been to Niagara Falls?
I never have.
Big waterfall, lots of water. You can take a little boat and go around the bottom and get wet if you want to. My Canadian friends do make me give the caveat. They believe the Canadian side is much prettier than the American side, just so you're aware. But I just have to say that. But what most people do is they don't go upriver 2 or 3 miles above Niagara Falls. And that's where this analogy comes into play, because if you are able to think of that analogy, as you get closer to the falls, the current starts getting stronger and you hear loud sounds. And when we were there, there were like warning bells saying, danger, hey, you in the barrel, get out, you're going to die. and there's even a cable to grab onto. But farther upriver, it's calm. You can move in and out of the water. You can make choices about where you want to go, what you want to do. So I have couples make 4 lists in the work I do with them. I have them make a list about how I know I'm going to be okay and what tells me when I'm not okay. What are the warning signs that I'm upset about something? I have that person make a list about their partner and how they know if their wife or their husband is upset or not okay about something. And then, of course, I have the other partner make a list about themselves and a list about the other partner. So you have 4 lists then of warning signs that tell you when the relationship is not doing okay. And what you do, I have some couples that have like laminated a big picture of Niagara Falls on their wall in their kitchen, and they've got their warning signs marked where they are and so forth, because you can use this to say, if we can stop the process and step out of the water early and say, you see that big waterfall over there? That's going to be weeks of forgiveness. We're going to say things that we don't mean. Once you go over the waterfalls, if you recall what it's like after a waterfall, there's all these eddies and you get stuck in the bottom and you're spinning around, you can't get out. We have a lot of forgiveness and work to do if we go over those falls. So what if we could see it coming and make choices to get out of the falls before that happens? That's where the analogy is used in the work I do with couples.
I love that. Can I ask you, maybe even just to be a little vulnerable, what would be some, as you've developed self-awareness, what are some of the warning signs for you in your marriage of like, I'm getting closer to the falls?
Part of the history we have, it's in the first book that I wrote called The Controlling Husband, is that I'm a fairly rigid, structured guy. I like things to work a certain way. Some people call that narcissistic, and it has to do with the idea that I learned to be anxious early on in my life. My mom was a wonderful, loving Christian woman, but God bless her, she could see bad things coming a mile away, and she would teach me to try to avoid them. And so I liked to be in control of things, and I still do. And so if I find myself wanting to fix this problem with the virus right now and solve the fact that I can't hang out with my friends, or I can't, go into work and be with the people that I love being around in my work family. And if I feel like I need to fix that, I'm not trusting God. I'm assuming that I'm in charge of things. So for me, a warning sign would be if I start feeling anxious, if I start wanting to control the situation, if I'm not thinking about what God might be teaching me, right? Because in a lot of these situations, when I start thinking that way, I'm focusing much more on what I want, what I need. And then suddenly my wife, Jan, and all of her needs and all of my desire that I tried to wake up in the morning thinking I would prioritize go out the window because I'm upset because I can't have my way. So a lot of it has to do with selfishness for me. Anytime I start going over toward the selfish kind of area, I find I'm in some difficulty.
What would you tell someone who says, I don't know if I have a great amount of self-awareness? How does a person begin to step into or lean into learn self-awareness?
Oh, this is great because what you're talking about is, do you want to be the person God created you to be, or do you not? Right? Do you want to take your spouse and say, you know what? You're probably going to see my faults and my challenges and the things I need to work on sooner than I will. So I want to tell you, I'm inviting you into my life to tell me when I'm not being the man God created me to be. If you're going to spend time in the Word and look at Bible study as a means of God speaking to you to tell you and teach you how to be a person that can model Christ in the world, my goodness, you enter that Bible study in a whole different mind frame than if you're just going in it to say, well, let me look at the text and try and think cognitively in my mind, as opposed to saying, so God, what do you got to teach me today? So a lot of it has to do with whether or not members of your community want to actually look at the people around them and say, hold me accountable. Help me be the person God created me to be. And then suddenly all sorts of possibilities open up in terms of change and transformation. That's what I call my practice transformational marriage, because I really believe people have to change in terms of the internal parts of who they are if they want the relationship to change.
That's really good. Kind of turning a corner here, Dr. Welch. We're in a time of crisis right now, in one form or another. I'm curious to know some of your thoughts. What might our takeaways be as a result of having this time of lockdown, of social distancing, of isolation, of our normal maps of meaning of life being sort of thrown out the window. I guess my question is, do we just go back to the old normal, the way it was? Let's just get back to the way everything, was previously? Or I wonder, is God wanting to teach us some things during this time so that when we enter our new normal, we're different? I don't know. What are some of your thoughts around that?
I think that's an outstanding idea, Brent, because there's a level of expectation people have that when a crisis occurs, you just need to get through it, survive it, go out the other side, and then it'll be over and it's back to normal. Barna did a bunch of research related to the issues involved after 9/11, and he looked at how and what people did in going to church, and they all flooded to church after 9/11 because everybody felt we need to be there because things are so tense. Then they went back and looked at churches a year later, and gosh, most of the researchers that investigated that, church attendance had gone down back to what it was, because planes weren't flying into buildings anymore and people weren't worried about that. I'm worried that that's what we'll do here, that we'll say, hey, we made it through. Congratulations, Timberline community. Now we're back to where we were. I'm not sure we want to go back to January 1st, right? I wonder what we're learning about things like taking care of our neighbors, as an example. What would it be like if you didn't need a reason to determine whether your neighbor had dinner, right? Now we're checking because someone might be sick, but that same neighbor might not have had dinner 6 months ago and none of us went to check, right? So there's something about, do we want to take care of our neighbors? Do we want to live in community? I don't know, actually get to know our neighbors and have a fellowship together. Another example would be church. Do we want to do church the way we've always done church? Or do we want to be okay with people who come on Christmas and Easter, or people who come only on Sundays for an hour? Or do we want content like you're creating right now in our discussion? Do we want that to be a part of how we do church and learning about God's will for our lives every week, all the time? Because we do that in other aspects. We do that with our business work. We're constantly learning and developing. Shoot, most of us have to have like continuing education to be better at our jobs. I've always thought you should have to have continuing education in marriage, where you have to keep taking classes to continue your marriage certification or something. But I don't think the state would like that. But the idea would be, how about something like selfishness and unselfishness, right? What if that were part of the lessons that we've learned from this crisis, is that if we only worry about ourselves, then things like a virus can spread. Because the only way we slow down this virus, and I'm not being political, I'm just basically looking at what I've seen in terms of development across the world. The only way we survived this is to work together to protect each other and live as in community, right? And so, yes, we isolated more, but we made decisions to do the right things as a community to make sure other people weren't infected and other people didn't get ill. And I think there's something about that. Lastly, maybe I think there's something along this lines of thinking about who we are as people, and whether or not a crisis brings out the best and the worst in us. And I think, a lot of people kind of view it that way, that crises bring out the best and the worst. And I guess we've seen that. We've seen people, cutting in front of other people to get to an item that's short in the stores and pushing people. You've seen the videos of what stores look like. But then we've seen people, I heard this story in the news the other day of a person who found out their neighbor's car didn't work. And so they're like, well, heck, and she's all upset. She has to get to work. Neighbor says, here's my keys, take my car. She's like, what? It's like, yeah, just bring it back when you're done. She comes back home after going to work. Her car is back home. He's taken the car, had it towed, had it fixed. The car works now because the battery's been fixed. And now she has her car back when she gets home from work that day. That stuff should be on the news, right? But I wonder what would happen if those are the ways we tried to live our lives. And one of the lessons we can take from this experience is that we're all in this together. We're living in community, and we need to live that out in how we treat everyone around us.
Wow. So it's definitely maybe forcing us to ask the question, not how do we do church, but what does it mean to be the church?
Right. And I think those questions are intertwined, right? Because if being a church and doing church is for an hour on Sunday, then that's different than, okay, today, what does my community need from me today? Right. And so then it's a matter of saying, well, I wonder who can't get their groceries tonight, or I wonder who's feeling depressed or lonely or isolated. We talked about some of the experiences couples are having. I'm hearing a lot about families having the same kind of challenges where just having their kids home all the time and having to deal with college kids who moved back, because now we got the boomerang kid that was out there and now they're back in the house. Suddenly you've got 7 when there were 3, and it's, wow, how do we make that work? And some couples really struggle with seeing that as an opportunity to have more quality time with their kids than they would have. You know, we have always asked for more quality time, right? Well, we got it. We just didn't know all the challenges that were going to be involved in having that much time with these people that we love. And so I think part of that is to say, can I take a moment and stop before I start my day and ask God, who is it you want me to be? What are the opportunities with my family today that you're offering me? And can you help me think through what this day should look like, rather than open up the planner and do what it tells you to do? And I think some of that is slowing down. I have heard some people tell me that their lives have slowed a bit in this crisis, and that they're trying to live at a different pace. Wow, that seems like a lesson we could take going forward, to slow down. And we're in the state of Colorado. Why on earth are we not looking up to the mountains and getting there all the time? When sometimes people tell me they've lived here 5 years and they've been up the mountains once in the last 5 years. And it's not like you have to spend a lot of money. You just go that way, just kind of go west and they're there. And it seems like, boy, if we could take advantage of all that glorious beauty and the opportunities God has around us, seems like those are lessons we could take out of this situation, so we wouldn't go back to the same normal. It would really be new and greater and more of what God has in mind for us as a community.
Oh, that's so good. So maybe, question that you asked in there, maybe that I would just challenge our Timberline community with is, what does my community need from me today? And to start at the smallest circle, my community, like who's around me right now, my family,
Right.
going out to larger concentric circles. What does this part of my community need from me today? What does this part of my community need from me today? You think that might be a good challenging question to whether if a person is starting their day right now, or if they're in the middle of it, or they're kind of winding the day up?
Absolutely. I think that's a framework for being the person God wants you to be and taking advantage of the opportunities that he puts in front of you. We miss half of them because we're too busy doing what we think we need to do to just stop and look and say, wow, this person looks like they need help. I might be late for my meeting, but oh well. I mean, what would it be like if we just, taking care of our neighbor and loving each other was the priority on every day?
Wonderful. Dr. Welch, thank you so much for taking this time to again invest in the Timberline community. We're really, really grateful. We're thankful for the history that we have with you as well, and look forward to more of these sorts of connections.
Absolutely. I value my relationship with Timberline immensely, and I look forward to more interactions in the future. God bless you, and God bless your community.
Thanks so much, Dr. Welch.
Thank you.